Putin might respond. And he might respond by reducing his oil supplies to the global market, pushing up the crude price, and he might actually not be hurt that much. But of course, the West would be hurt.
Welcome back to BVTV. I'm Peter Thalassen, the global editor of Reuters Breakingviews, and I'm joined once again by Hugo Dixon, the commentator at large for Reuters from his study in London. Hugo, welcome back.
Lovely to be here, Peter.
So Hugo, the topic today is Russia, and specifically sanctions on Russia. I mean, we're now 11 months into this terrible war. And you've been looking at the question really of what's been working and what hasn't been working in terms of how the West has tried to punish Russia. So what's your conclusion?
I mean, I think the conclusion is obviously the military aid has been decisive, but above and beyond that, the export controls on military goods and dual-use goods, that's any sort of things like chips that could be useful for the Russian military, that's degraded their equipment. What, in my view, has, and the financial sanctions, particularly freezing half of their $600 billion of reserves. But in my view, the hydrocarbon sanctions, and initially that was threats, those have largely backfired on the West. We saw last year that Russia's current account surplus doubled to almost $230 billion, largely because in the first part of the year, there was a bonanza as both the oil price and the gas price shot up. And so what it delivered a bonanza to Putin, while at the same time clobbering the Western economies, particularly Europe, and giving us a bout of global inflation. So that seemed, at least initially, that's not been a successful measure.
So things have changed now, right? So, I mean, on the one hand, Europe has made quite good progress in terms of weaning itself off Russian energy, particularly gas. There's this oil price cap, which the G7 has agreed. At the same time, the prices are coming down. So is there an element now that maybe what has been done is a bit more successful?
Well, I don't think, I mean, in my view, what has been done in that regard hasn't been particularly successful. But I'm not arguing that we rewind it and let the sanctions go, because I think that would send an extremely bad political message. But the debate now is whether or not the sanctions should be tightened further. And there are some economists, particularly connected with the Kiev School of Economics, who have been pushing the idea that we should lower that price cap on the oil exports. At the moment, it's doubtful how much effect that's having, because the cap is actually higher than the price that Russia has been selling its oil. What could really hurt them is if the cap was reduced significantly below the price that they're selling the oil, which is what the Kiev School of Economics is proposing. And then there is a proposal also to turn off the rest of the gas. Some gas is still getting through, mainly through the pipeline via Turkey, a pipeline through Ukraine, which they think shouldn't be touched, and some liquefied natural gas exports. And so that's the debate now. And I'm saying we shouldn't go that way.
But wouldn't it hurt the Russian economy, and particularly Putin, a lot more if you could sort of further reduce what he's getting from in terms of hydrocarbon exports? And what's the argument for not doing that?
Well, the argument is, first of all, that, okay, the current account surplus, that 230 billion, 227 billion, that is very much influenced by the beginning of last year. But still, even with the drop in the oil and gas prices that we've seen in recent months, Russia is heading for a current account surplus this year. The Kiev School of Economics, their modeling suggests their measures would cut $40 billion. The hydrocarbon revenues last year were about 350. They're down to, on current sort of course, they're about 180. They'd knock another 40 billion. But that would still probably leave Russia more or less in balance on its current accounts. So it wouldn't be facing a huge amount of damage. And it's still got it's still got $300 billion of reserves that haven't been frozen, so they could dip into that. But above and beyond that, my argument is that Putin might respond, and he might respond by reducing his oil supplies to the global market, pushing up the crude price. And even though he'll have to take a discount on that, which he's currently taking, he might actually not be hurt that much. But of course, the West would be hurt, because we'd be back into where we were a few months ago, where everyone was tearing their hair out about global recession, rising interest rates, rising inflation, rising public sector debts, et cetera, just as we seem to be thinking, well, there's some green shoots of recovery that are starting. We'll go back into the deep freeze.
Yes, and sort of following that through, I mean, I think your argument is also the political consequences of that could end up sort of undermining Western support for the war. Well,
that is the risk. I mean, as we know that some European countries are quite wobbly. Obviously, you know, when the economy is not doing too badly, they're less wobbly. But if we're into that sort of deep recession scenario, they'll get wobbly. And it's next year, the end of next year is the next US presidential election. And if by some stretch of the imagination you got Trump, or a sort of Trump 2.0 in the White House, Western support for arming the Ukrainians to the teeth might wane. And so even on the military, and since it's that military support which is really vital, even if you're not concerned about the economics of this at all, on a pure military basis, I'm not sure that's a risk that you should be taking.
Right. So hence the conclusion that to keep the war effort going, you have to try to not bankrupt Russia. Hugo, fascinating as always. Great to talk to you, and look forward to talking to you again soon.